session will now come to order. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming. Denise, will you please call the roll?
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran. John Witzel.
Yes.
Lisa Fricke.
Yes.
Patsy Kojon.
Yes.
And Commissioner Bloomstead.
Yes.
7 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. Information regarding the Open Meetings Act is posted on the east wall of this room on the south side of the door. Live web streaming will be available through the State Board of Education website, www.education.ne.gov/state board. And I ask that you engage your microphones before speaking and turn them off when you're done speaking, and please turn off any personal cell phones. Thank you. Okay, the first item on our agenda is board reports, dates, and discussion items, and meeting participation and joint meetings with policy partners. I sent an update out to you, and this is where we usually have our individual reports of where we've been since the March board meeting. But as I mentioned in my email earlier this week, this month we're trying something new. I'd like to try a brief group discussion around events that several board members have attended rather than reporting out individually. I think this will improve our efficiency and expedite our agenda in giving us ample time to discuss some real key agenda items. And as you went through your committee meetings this morning, you can see we have a lot on our plate right now. So to begin with, we've had 3 different meetings that people have attended, more than one of us. The stakeholders engagement sessions, the NERCS spring conference, and the NASB conference in DC. So let's start with the stakeholder engagement sessions. As we discuss this topic, please keep in mind that we're going to have an opportunity to further discuss the stakeholder engagements tomorrow under 9.1 with the commissioner and the deputy commissioner when we talk about Essa. So a few of us have attended more than one session, so thank you. My, you've all been very busy, doing lots and lots of things. So who would like to give one aha about your engagement session that you, John?
I was honored to attend the Omaha area as a training session with Patrick McPherson, Lisa, and Patsy here. And it was an exceptional conference in regards to, we had full seating. Matter of fact, people were standing because there was so much participation. But the interaction between all the participants was just exceptional. It was really engaging, and I think we all walked away a lot better, if you will, informed of our stakeholders' needs and their ambitions for the future. But so thank you very much.
Okay.
I attended also the Lincoln and Omaha stakeholders meetings, and the attendance at those 2 were a little smaller than the one that we attended together in Omaha. But I wanted you to know that even though they were smaller in attendance, they were still just as great in energy and excitement and caring about their students and what this could mean for them. So excellent conversation about improving Nebraska schools,
Good.
whether it was a small crowd or a large crowd.
Rachel?
But I would like to bring up, I think the AHA is where there were small crowds. So Norfolk, for example, had very, very small crowd. I think it'd be good for us to, if you're reporting out tomorrow numbers, to look at numbers so that we can also think about where do we need to do some additional reaching out to areas within the state that maybe there wasn't the representation, so that we are ensured that we're getting a full voice from across the state as we make some decisions.
I think we've been talking about that in the department, that there are people that we may need to reach out to, or groups that we need to reach out to individually, and instead of just a blanket community meeting. And so there's some discussion going on about that. And as we go on, if you as board members, stop and think about the ones you went to and have suggestions, please let them know. Lisa.
I echo exactly the thoughts of the people who have spoken. Excellent session in Omaha. Got to meet a lot of great people. They worked together. The plan from the state board to make everything go efficiently was awesome.
Okay, Patrick?
Well, just share Lisa and John's comments ditto, but I'll probably have some more things to say tomorrow about engagement.
Okay, well, we will do that. Maureen?
I attended the Lincoln site simply because I was out of state for the Grand Island site. But it was good for me to hear some of the stakeholders in the room, like the mental health folks, that I don't get to hear from that often. And so I like that. And I also, it was reflective to me at the end that I know it's part of our plan, and that is to have continuous stakeholder meetings. We need to do it. They want to be involved.
Good. Good. I attended the one in Beatrice, and my aha was, even though it was a small group, there were a couple of people there that I really hadn't ever had the chance to listen to their viewpoints. One was a music instructor, and one was a new school psychologist. She was fresh out of getting her degree. And it was really interesting to hear the things that she was seeing for the first time in a school district, and particularly with at-risk kids. And so it was very interesting to listen to her. So thank you. Thank you all for taking the time to do that. Okay, John and Lisa, you went to the NERCSA Spring Conference. What was going on there?
Thank you very much. Lisa and I were very honored to attend the NERCSA conference in Kearney, Nebraska, and it was a very, very well-attended conference. As a matter of fact, many of the classes they had, seminars, were, if you will, standing room only. It was that full and that enthusiastic in regards to the, if you will, lesson material. But the one thing I learned a lot about NERCSA and our rural schools in regards to the challenges and problems and they face is that they have some of the same issues and concerns as the rural school districts in eastern Nebraska. I'll give you an example. They're having issues with early childhood development, how to get money for early childhood development. They have concerns about closing the achievement gap, just like OPS has concerns about closing the achievement gap. And the, if you will, the funds, the resources to go along to support some of these ventures that we're seeking. So that was very much enlightening. Also, I'd like to thank the NDE staff for presenting some first-class lectures, briefings in regards to anywhere from career technical education to the budget, the NDE budget. So thank you, NDE staff, very professional. Thank you.
Good. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Lisa?
I agree with John. It was very interesting to go to a session on school law. And it was a learning experience. Some of it I knew, but explained in greater detail. One of the big joys was seeing former students who are now administrators and former administrators, and it was nice to reconnect. I enjoyed, and the FFA this morning, reconnecting with kids, whether you're former students or students now, it's amazing. I miss it.
Oh, good, good. And we also had several, Maureen and Molly and Rachel went along with Donlin and Scott Summers to the Nasbe Spring Conference. That's usually centered around legislation, and you all had a chance to go up on the Hill and talk to our senators and congressmen. So Rachel, Maureen, go ahead.
No, NASB was outstanding conference this year. A lot of the focus was on Essa and giving guidance to states and what we should be thinking about as we're looking at Essa plans. Gave examples of things that were happening with stakeholder engagement in other states. Gave examples of accountability and processes that will be incorporated. And I know we're going to talk about Essa tomorrow, so I think I'll leave most of those kinds of examples for tomorrow. We talked about federal legislation and things that are happening with the higher ed reauthorization and career and tech ed reauthorization. I think we'll talk about that in the legislative committee some today as well. And then we also, both Molly and I, Molly is on the Governmental Affairs Committee, and I chair the Public Education Positions Committee. So those two committees met jointly to really look at the redesign of the public education position statements for Nasbe, and focused on two areas. We focused on career and technical education and focused on teacher preparation as kind of the two areas that we focused on. Came up with a draft and kind of the direction that we're going, and then the Public Education Positions Committee will be reworking most of our public education positions. I think Don Lynn's going to maybe report out and share the information. One of the really exciting resources that we now have from NASB is called Insight, and we'll either share a little more today and then maybe next month of that new resource that's coming out of NASB. And I'll let Maureen talk about some of the other sessions and activities.
Well, 2 years ago, I attended a legislative conference, and I really found this one to be much more educational overall. And as I reflect on it, it's because 2 years ago, we were wondering, well, is No Child Left Behind going to be reauthorized? And now here we are with Essa. So they were talking a lot about, what states needed to be doing and the policy and the policy making that we would be looking at. But another piece, and we'll talk probably some more tomorrow on the legislative pieces, but I also wanted to share that on Tuesday afternoon, I did not go up to the Hill, and I didn't feel too bad because I had gone to the Senator Fisher and Senator Sass's town hall meetings when they were in town in the state earlier that previous week. But the Department of Ed here in Nebraska, with our early childhood partners, has put us on the radar screen nationally. And Nebraska is being asked to write out a grant, which I think Don Lynn is doing, because they've asked us to be part of a 5-state group. The 4 states have already been working together, and it's a committee on building a strong early childhood education workforce through educative state policy. And Nebraska will be joining these groups. And I sat in on Tuesday afternoon while Molly and Rachel went to the Hill for a 4-hour session where NASB had introduced their key national partners and their work in helping these 4 state teams and ways in which they can help us when we join the group and what they can do with us as we move down the road. And I want to thank Melody Hobson for putting together the key talking points that she wanted me to share as to what Nebraska is doing, especially with the early, with the Buffett Foundation and First Five. But I emphasize the glory that Nebraska had of being able to work with Dr. Sam Meisel's, and I shared that information with them. They were all writing down his name. I showed them where they could find him on the internet, his home.
Well,
or
you shouldn't give
his
out too much
email,
information. He's
and,
ours.
But what was really fun for me, though, was what the Buffett Foundation, or what Dr. Sam Meisel's and his partnership has done with the university system. And just the week before I had been up to UNK, picked up their weekly newspaper, and inside of it was a whole page dedicated, and I gave it to Don Lynn, a whole page dedicated to exactly what is transpiring there on campus with early childhood education. And so I shared that with the group, and so it was an exciting afternoon for me.
Thank you for doing that.
Just one, did you want to report out on the Secretary of Education?
I can do that.
Yes.
I didn't know if you wanted me to do that today or tomorrow.
Oh, by all means. Go
I can do
ahead.
that today. We had the opportunity to listen to our new Secretary of Education, Betsy Devos. She was very much on time. She was scheduled to give us 45 minutes, but she gave us a 10-minute speech, but no Q&A afterwards. She had a busy schedule, but I just have listed some of the key points that she talked about in her speech, and that was it's time for the Federal Department of Education to get out of the way and to let the states and the local leaders to do what's right for kids. With Essa, she will implement the intention of what Congress wanted to do with the freedom and flexibility that we deserve in our states. She talked about the president's budget and how all of the intent reflected it, indicating investing in our underserved communities and increased investment in choice programs. She stated that every child is different with varying skills and learning styles, and that we shouldn't force all children into a one-size-fits-all education system. So that's the notes that I took, and
Thank you, thank you. Does anybody have anything else that they went to see or want to tell us about?
Group effort. Also, I'd like to mention that 3 of us attended Dr. Sutphin's Superintendent Summit at Millard, where he discussed cyberbullying and suicide. Dr. Adler was the featured speaker there, and it was an outstanding, if you will, summit with a lot of good information with all speakers involved. So Pat McPherson, Lisa, and myself all attended. So thank you very much, Millard School Board, for sponsoring that. Thank you.
Good. Patrick?
Yes, we attended that, and I'll tell you what, you couldn't help but be touched by what you saw there, and the bravery and the courage of the superintendent Ralston and his wife to make that kind of presentation. And it was based around the issue of kindness, being kind and considerate, and gosh, I'll tell you, it just takes you back to see what that family went through, but also to just see what social media's issues are today. And I've got another thing that I went to that I'll just mention briefly. I attended a event at Bellevue University for nonprofits on social media, and found that very interesting. And 50% of the population on this earth is under the age of 30, and that should be telling us a great deal about how we're going to communicate in the future, and about how education is going to need to change and adapt in the future. So I thought that number was just striking.
That is.
So I got a couple other things, but I'll let Lisa or whoever.
Dr. Adler and his wife Joni losing their son to bullying incident was very, very, very touching. And what I love about the superintendents that are in my district and probably throughout the state, they're willing to share their resources. And I talked to Dr. Sutphin after, and he said that they would share any of their bullying resources so that people can adapt it to their own school system. And also I was invited to go to Papillion La Vista, kind of a vision planning, and John was there. And I appreciate the invitations from the districts so that we can get into the schools and find out what's on your mind and what's going on in your schools. And this was a 10-year vision plan, and they're going to be going through a lot of changes, as are other schools, as far as changing boundaries, and they're getting the community, teachers, parents, students, and the administrators are, of course, involved. So having all of the stakeholders in a decision moving forward in a district, I think, is vital to the success of that plan.
Well, I know we all really appreciate those of you, because there's 3 of you in Omaha, that you take all of those opportunities to go and visit those things that you're asked to attend. I really appreciate that. Pat, you said you had a couple of other things?
Yeah, one of the things that I was able to do was on March 15th, I spoke to Nebraskans for Tax Reform on what the State Board of Education does and how we function. So that was, I spent about an hour talking about that.
Oh, good.
On March 28th, I actually met with somebody that we don't normally see here, and it's Gary Sigel of the Association of American Educators, which is kind of opposition group to the NSEA, if you will, but it was an interesting conversation, and they do represent some teachers in Nebraska. And John and I don't know who else were present at the Collective for Youth event at Lewis and Clark Middle School here recently. They serve 7 middle schools and 23 elementary schools and after-hour programs that range from anything from wood burning to acting, and that was, I thought, very informative. I'm sure John will have something to say about that.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. Yes, it was, as a matter of fact. Early in the month, I had the opportunity, invited to the Gilder School in Omaha for Collective Youth, and one of their prime, if you will, draws to after-school programs, believe it or not, was drones. They were actively learning drones in the classroom, and it was really amazing, and the students were loving it. Also, I want to thank Sharon Cott for her visit to Bellevue University, where we were discussing Bellevue's progress in creating their School of Education. So that's very enlightening and exciting to see Bellevue on the way up with their School of Education. I joined up with Sarah Hansen of Vocational Rehab. We went to the Latino Center of the Midlands to meet with the Heartland Work Solutions. They're implementing new projects and plans out of the Latino Center for, if you will, workforce counseling and, if you will, schooling. So that was very good with Sarah Hansen of Vocational Rehab. I'd like to thank the DECA Awards ceremony, the Distributed Education Clubs of America award ceremony in Lincoln. They had close to 1,000 students attend an award ceremony, and it was very enthusiastic. I mean, it just was, those kids are moving forward. Thank God for them. They're going places, so thank you very much. Met with Dr. Ken Bird in regards to Avenue Scholar. He's heavily engaged with career education with his after-school programs. And Rich Cott and I met with representatives from the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce and sponsors of the ACE program, which is Architecture, Construction, and Engineering. And Rich is interested in a possible benchmarking the ACE programs with other schools in the states. So very encouraging, and the state is really moving forward. Thank you very much.
Good. Anybody else? Betsy?
I had the opportunity to be in 10 schools this last month, and Odell, Waverly, Southeast, Lincoln High, Southwest, Columbus, Lakeview, Humphrey, Grand Island, and UNK. And my mission there was to watch young people compete in their district and state speech contests. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for the school day to go beyond the school day and give all kinds of different kids, no matter what their ability level is or other qualifications they have, to achieve excellence in an extracurricular activity, and to watch them celebrate each other, large and small schools, and without any kind of selfishness at all. Has to be inspiring when you go to see that. And also, I was very proud to take several of us on the request of Mark Larson, the new principal at Lincoln High, to Lincoln High to go through that school. Lisa and Deb Friesen and Commissioner Blumstead went with us. Blumstead? I always do it wrong.
I can't remember.
Forgive me, yeah, forgive me. Anyway, I think the neatest thing that we saw there is we went down to the music department, and we got to see the orchestra, the band, and then we saw a small group of students who were preparing a performance that were SPED kids, and they were so excited about their performance and showing us what the new choreography that they had. And it was, we all left with big old lumps in our throat because they were just so excited to be able to show off for us. And then I also attended the Nebraskans for the Arts Advocacy Day here in Lincoln. It was all over the state, and I chose to remain in Lincoln to do that in support of the NEA and also in support of arts education and what it does for our students. And I was very proud to be there. Our job that day was to bring as many people in as possible to write their senators to talk about what the arts had done for them, their children, their grandchildren, and to enhance their educations and to make them more successful. And I know from my past experience that the arts can make kids stay in school, be more successful in their classes, and speak to kids on all areas of the spectrum. And I think that's super important. So this is a wonderful month.
Well, good. Well, thank you all. Oh, Rachel.
Just real quick, I just want to give a shout out to Fremont Public Schools. I was there earlier last week, and I think it's important, the conversation there with superintendent and assistant superintendents, you know, all of our schools, and I think this is not just Fremont, it's all of our schools, are doing a lot of great, great things with changing demographics and changing needs, and have some real concerns about the direction that we're going, not just as a state board, but as we're going, looking at issues around school funding and looking at the issues that may impact schools, and really concerned about how we move forward in our advocacy role, even though, and we'll talk later in our legislative committee, even though our role really isn't around school finance, we do have a relationship and a need to understand the challenges that our schools face. And though I appreciate Fremont for really painting the different scenarios for Fremont Public Schools, I think we could find that in all of our schools, and being aware of the challenges our school faces
Sure.
are really, I think, critical for us.
Good. Well, you've been a busy group. Thank you for doing all of that. I think it is very important that we make that connection, and I think all of what you talked about is also a part of our community engagement, and I think that's very good. We'll move on. We have requests for more meeting attendance this next month, and we have a list. Has anybody looked at anything that they don't have on the list that they would like to attend that's coming up?
I might try to attend the Nebraska Educational Technology Association.
Oh, okay, John. John. I was looking at you and, I don't know. Anyway, yes, Patrick, we'll put you down for that.
Okay. Can I make just a brief comment?
Sure.
I removed my name from the event, the AQuest event in Kearney. I'm not aiming at anybody or anything, but it seems to me when we originally had 7 people registered to go to that event. That's 7 hotel fares and a lot of costs. Some of these events are more important than others, I realize, but it just seems to me, you know, I keep talking about our fiduciary duty, and it just seems to me that sometimes we ought to think about how many people we have going to some of these events and the cost that's involved, because when you pay mileage and you pay for hotel fare, and sometimes when you got, I don't know how much it benefits us to have 7 people or more than 4 people go
At
to
the
some of
same
these
thing.
events. So it just, that's the reason I pulled my name from it, because frankly, I'll go to as many events in the Omaha area as that, you know, particularly if they're not if they're not costing the board a lot. But when we kind of got an obligation right now when the state is facing the crisis that it is on budgeting, and when we're looking at cutbacks here at the department, I think, you know, just behooves us to be a little bit more careful about how many people we're going to events. And again, I'm not aimed at anybody, but I think it's something we need to think about.
I think that's a point very well taken, Pat. Thank you. Oh, Maureen?
I would just like to add to Patrick's piece that for those of us in the western part of Nebraska, it's so much harder for us to ever connect with, especially the administrators. And so going to these things that bring teams of individuals from their schools that represent our area really does benefit, especially someone like me in central Nebraska. And no, I'm not doing a hotel room. I'll be driving in that morning.
All right. Rachel?
Yeah, and I would concur, and Pat, I certainly understand your perspective. And I think there are some conferences like the one that's coming up, AQuest, that really is very essential. I think we have to think about what's essential for our roles and our responsibilities. And AQuest being about our accountability system and our responsibility with priority schools and our responsibility as we move forward with Essa on how we'll think about our needs improvement schools, to hear from our constituents that are there and attending and look at what some of the best practices are and to learn and listen. I think there are some things that are really very important for us. Even if we pay for our own pocket, that may be a different discussion we have to have. But I think they're really important to inform us and educate us in the roles that we have. And AQuest that's coming up is one of those examples.
Thank you. Well, if anyone has any other additional travel requests to be approved, please give them to Donlin and Laura before tomorrow, so we can put it on the list and have it approved. Next is our monthly board travel expense report, and we just had a little conversation about that. This report is attached to your agenda, and that is there for you to review. So we will move on to the Commissioner's report. Commissioner Bloomstead.
All right, I'll take care of the routine business. Just a reminder of consent agenda items, and if you have anything that we'll be considering tomorrow on consent agenda that you would like to have either more information about or would like to remove from consent agenda, please fill out that pink sheet and put it in the box over there by Scott. Number 2, there's the item around upcoming rules and where we're at with some of the current processes. I think we have Rule 19, 21, and 24, which are pending approval at the AG's office. A rule actually coming up today from the Budget and Finance Committee, Rule 1, on rules and regs regarding the audits, and I know we'll have a bit of a conversation at that point. First thing, I think I'll turn it over to Donlin for a little bit of a report, and then I'll come back to me for a bit of a discussion on my topic, so thanks.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. I just have a couple of quick things. Want to share with you 2 exciting websites that I think that you will really enjoy seeing. The first one is the blue sheet that I handed out to you. This is your website. This is your strategic vision website. And I want to give kudos to Katie Bieber and her communications team. So this is out there for anyone to be able to access. And you can see there's all different ways people can access this site. But again, when you talk about, just even click on About, there's our full document on the vision and direction. And so there's all different kinds of things. If you just want to go to what our specific roles are, it's all right there. So I'm not going to go through the whole website, but you may access it at your leisure. And also for the folks that are in the audience today, it's a way of our state board sharing their vision and direction. So I think that's very exciting. The next one is the Nasbe Insight website. And this is a very exciting tool that Nasbe has put together. It gives us a way to track what is happening across the nation at state boards of education. And so I put that link on this next handout for you. If you don't have anything to do this week, they're having a webinar that will explain this. So again, this is just for your information, but this will be a wonderful resource for us. You know, last year as we were doing our strategic planning, if this had been done, we could have clicked on it and found out, oh, we have 7 other states that are going through strategic planning. So it's going to be a really nice resource, I think, for states. And then the final piece that I put at your desk is just something you might want to have for tomorrow. It talks about 7 questions state boards should ask before their state plans for Essa are submitted. So those are just some pieces of information that I put at your plate. And also, I was very, Rachel and Maureen did a great job on talking about the conference. I was very pleased that I was able to go along with them, as was Scott. It's really nice for us to be able to rub shoulders with people in our like positions at a national conference. So thank you for allowing me to go to that. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Donlin, and actually, I got to do a few thank yous always. Thank yous for the state board's engagement in a lot of different places at a lot of different times. I do like to highlight how I believe you really model proper engagement of board members across the state. I think it's a great model that we have relative to how our work rolls out and how we have discussions, and I think it's really quite important. I think also that, I was recently in DC as well. A lot of what we've talked about over the last, really my 3 years and 3 months here, really what's our responsibilities? What are our responsibilities when it comes to our interactions with the federal government? What's our responsibilities between the board and the commissioner? What are our responsibilities as it reflects to our work collectively with school districts? And I wanted to be able to talk a bit about that today for a couple reasons. And one reason, obviously, we've had a lot of conversations in the state of Nebraska about what's happened in Omaha Public Schools, and we were hit up pretty hard by, and I know many of you had conversations individually with me about what's our responsibility when a school district is struggling on certain aspects of their work. And so recently, as you watch what's happening in OPS around their ability to get the next administration hired, their next leadership established, and some concern. And we have a legitimate reason always to be concerned with how our school districts are able to function and able to move forward. I wish I could tell you OPS was unique in the state. On occasion, we have 245 districts. On occasion, we have other school districts that struggle with the very same thing. And I wanted to highlight in particular the notion of why we select priority schools and how we went through that process generally, and that process underneath accountability, a new tool set relative to how we work. And when you look at our selection of 3 priority schools, we worked with Loup County and continue to work with Loup County, continue to work with Santee Public Schools, and continue to work actually very productively with Omaha Public Schools in addressing, in that case, Druid Hill, and that was one of our selected places. In Loup County, we had a different situation than we did in Santee, than we did in Omaha. But actually in Loup County, we had a conversation with their board about what their responsibilities were. And we wrote that into the priority school plan, and we work with them and work with their school around what those responsibilities are together. In Santee, we worked with the school, but honestly, we work with their board. I talk often with their board president around how we help them manage and get through very challenging circumstances that they face in their community. We do that often. And quite honestly, it's a very important part of our priority school plans. I was asked, well, gee, why didn't we include a board plan for Omaha Public Schools when we had that chance with Druid Hill, perhaps? Because quite honestly, we had a great working relationship and continue to have a great working relationship with the administration at OPS. How we think about improving circumstances is really quite critical. But it does highlight, hey, we might have been able to look at that slightly differently and included a board plan. I will tell you at that point when we selected OPS, I was able to meet with the then president and vice president of their board, so they were very much engaged in the conversation and supportive of that. And I'm not saying that they're not still supportive of that. But when we look at what our responsibilities are, we have a responsibility to provide leadership and find ways that we can lead and guide and move us through tough circumstances. That happens in small communities, that happens in large communities. And so often when we're asked, well, what could we be doing? Well, we have to think about that. So I want to talk just a little bit about what I think we can do and should be doing as a board from a policy level, from an agency level. I'm actually, maybe I can say, proud of my first statement when I was named commissioner. I think I got quoted in the paper right away I was asked about accountability and where we were going with accountability. And I said, I think we ought to be showing up first to offer our support before we show up to criticize. And so often that's been our lead into a productive conversation with schools that might have some type of struggle. And that's honestly where we remain with any school that has that issue. We get our powers from the Constitution. You exist as a constitutional board. Not everyone in the state understands that. I thank Pat for doing a presentation with folks about what the roles of the state board are. And our powers come from the legislature in many other ways, and including descriptions of many things that we have to do, as I like to describe, many things that we have to do. But responsibilities for school districts also exist in statute, and they're told that they have to do certain things. But I think our leadership responsibility, our roles that we've identified within the strategic plan include this notion of certainly championing a direction, certainly being a change agent on a certain level, certainly being in a position where we're regulating, that's part of our work, certainly building capacity, and then we've talked also about our connector role. So those are our 5 roles that identified in our strategic plan. Well, we have an opportunity to do that in many ways. Inside the department, we have obviously federal programs. So here we are working on an Essa plan describing how we want that to work in the future as well. Specifically as it relates to school districts, that's meaningful. There are certain powers and expectations that we would have of how schools operate. That's part of that process. Special education, we have a significant role in special education and ensuring that schools are able to operate that way. But I think we have an opportunity always to be asking boards and communities what they need to be successful. And I think it's at the root of our work that we find ways that we are supporting schools and communities and boards and administrators and teachers and students on how we can assist them to be successful. Now, often you get a situation, and perhaps a situation like OPS, and say, gosh, we got to solve that problem. We got to solve that problem somehow overnight. It doesn't work that way usually, because those problems don't necessarily just generate overnight. The fact of the matter is, again, in your work, you model behaviors as a board that I think are important for other boards to be watching. And I mentioned that. In fact, I know I got a few superintendents in the room where we've talked about that before too. How do we work between administrators and boards to be most effective? I propose we continue to work with Council of School Administrators and superintendents across the state to work on their part of that role. I propose that we continue to do our work in priority schools and that we identify what's really going to work at an instructional level. I propose, however, that we start doing work with boards in a fashion and with School Boards Association and others that would be logical to do that work. I scanned over the last couple weeks, scanned the country, asked the Council of Chief State School Officers to give me some ideas, looked at NASB resources to give me some ideas. What are the types of things that seem to work? And there's a lot, by the way. So on one instance, I can look at the Council of Great City Schools and realize that they have some services and supports that perhaps in our recommendation might be something that we could recommend to an Omaha Public Schools to be working with and moving their board forward through a process where they understand what their strategic plan is. Actually, they have a great strategic plan. It's how they use that strategic plan to keep them moving forward as a district is really critical. I also looked at the Center on School Turnaround, and the Center on School Turnaround talks about these best practices, and they actually have programs where school districts that need some assistance work with the state education agency to ensure that they have models that are in place, best practices in place that are going to help them. You know it matters when it comes down to governance. You know it matters when it comes down to administration. We know it matters when it comes down to the classroom instructional strategies that are taking place. But all of those things have to tie together. It's hard for an administration to work when a board doesn't work. It's hard for principals at a building level to do their work when central administration doesn't work. It's hard for teachers to be able to do their work when the principal doesn't know what their work is. We're looking at, and quite honestly, building systems that help us do that more effectively. Your state, your plan for the state, your strategic plan is part of that. Our plan around Essa and the work that we're doing to tie that together is part of that. Certainly our work that we've done with our priority schools is an intensive effort to ensure that's being done. And I would look at those things and tie those together. I want folks to realize that we're not missing what happens in an Omaha public school, but I'm also not missing what happens in schools across our state. that we're actively engaged in improving the education system on a daily basis. We do that through AQuest. We do that through our efforts to watch all these other programs. When we have an opportunity to be part of the solution, we ought to be part of that solution. And I encourage us to think about that. Perhaps you have some questions for me that you might say, oh, why could we consider this or could we consider that? But you know it's in our policy work. We don't have a lot of things. We don't hire superintendents, by the way, at school districts. That's not our job. That's not our job. But we know that we have an interest that those processes work effectively, so that their schools work effectively. And that's part of our conversation and part of our desire and part of our work overall. So I wanted to share that with you because I think when I watch across the state and people get excited about what's happening in one place, to realize the system of education, we're in this as a support system, we're in this in all of our various roles, and we're going to play out those roles and find the best way to do it because we're about improving educational outcomes for students. Your strategic plan tells me so. We've been working on that for a long time, and I'm actually, I'm convinced that we can help in circumstances, but we have to be able to understand what our roles are to help, what their roles are to help, and tie that together in a meaningful way. So I say that, I get my soapbox. I thank the folks that are here because we have lots of other conversations yet to have today, but I seldom get on the soapbox in front of you. Well, I was going to say seldom. I seldom do it without a PowerPoint. But it's important. I mean, and that's our work, and I don't want anyone in the state of Nebraska to believe that we aren't willing to be part of that solution, because we certainly are, and we'll continue that dialogue and continue to find ways to help every school across Nebraska serve their students well. So that's my soapbox statement for the moment.
Any board members have any questions or comments of the commissioner?
I don't have any. I guess maybe mine would be more along comments rather than questions. I think I, like a lot of folks around on this board, have been asked, you know, what can the board do? And I think you made a good point, Commissioner. You know, we got to know what our role is, and absent some change in legislation, you know, we can be an asset to these boards if they want our help. You know, it's still very hard to respond to citizens when they ask you, well, why can't you do something? And you know, sadly, in the case of Omaha, I'm just gonna put it the way I see it. You know, you got a board that doesn't appear to be functional. It's affecting their ability to get a superintendent. It's affecting their ability to potentially issue a bond issue, which is very important to them. It's affecting their credibility, I think, with the community. You got discipline issues that we've also discussed that, you know, again, you know, hopefully are being worked on. We've got 50,000 children at stake in that district, and you know, I understand why the citizens are so concerned about this, and I'm concerned about it. And hopefully, we can offer some kind of you know, advice and help if we're asked. But just for the sake of the public, we know our role, and our role at this point is that there's not a great deal that we can do. So, other than try to be as helpful as possible. And so, I appreciate your efforts in that regard, Mr. Commissioner.
Rachel?
And thank you, Commissioner, for your remarks. I think they're really spot on and important for us to consider. And Pat, I would say that there are things that we need to think about, as the Commissioner pointed out, and I think we'll look towards you to hear what are some of the things that we can do. And I think there are some things that we can be proactive in a different way. So we accredit schools. Are there things in our regulatory process that sometimes aren't in the best interest of really looking at accountability as a part of the direction that we're going? Are there processes that we have that maybe we haven't improved effectively to help our school districts, to help school boards and superintendents guide the direction? So, you know, we sometimes wait for the legislature to mandate something, as opposed to us sometimes thinking about, can we do a better job proactively in our regulatory environment to help schools in some capacity? I think those are things that we maybe need to look at and consider. And do we have things that maybe are not as effectively developed to be in place to help our schools continuously improve?
I agree
Maureen?
with you
Oh, excuse me.
100% on that.
I'm sorry, Patrick, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Maureen?
Well, Commissioner, you kind of went along with a goal that I made for myself for this next year. And that was when I was reviewing one of the action items that we were going to be working on that Frida's going to be talking to us later on. And that deals with the approved non-public schools. And as I looked at the list, I have at least 22. There's a couple of towns I don't know where they're at. I don't know if they're in my unit or not. Hayter, Nebraska. I thought I knew the state pretty well, but when I looked at that list, I thought, that's part of one of our school choices. We talk about choice in Nebraska. And what have I done as a board member to really step up to the plate to say, have I really reached out to them? And so my goal between now and next year, when Frida brings this to us, is to make a visitation to every one of these schools, to ask them some of these various questions. What is it that the state board is not doing that maybe you think we should be, whether we can or not? And so what you've mentioned is, I will continue to do it in the public schools as well, but when we think about choice and the importance of how we want to keep the choice that we have, at least in my opinion anyway, I'm looking forward to this opportunity, and I think it will open doors for our non-public schools to, maybe reach out more to us as well.
It's true. It's true. Lisa?
I think we're having a great conversation that needed to be had, and I think one of the keys is what several of you have talked about today is getting into the schools and visiting and just listening, that communication. What you said, Commissioner, what can we do to support your success? And if we're doing this on an ongoing basis, maybe we can ward off some potential things, because I, as an individual, especially a newbie on the board, wouldn't know how to answer that, but I know where to go for the answer, to Donlin, to you, to find out a staff member who could answer the question that I may not be able to answer. But communication, I think we're on the right track, getting into the schools and listening. What can we do to help you be successful?
John?
Thank you, Pat. I'd like to refer back to Rachel Wise. Rachel Wise and I were discussing this situation just very informally about the situation and what we can and cannot do. But we brought up the fact, Rachel did, one of the big indicators that we need to look at right now is the welfare of the kids in regards to, is their achievement continuing on, growing, safety, are they learning? In other words, it's paramount to remember the students right now during this situation. Are they getting what they need in regards to their education, if you will, requirements? So I think that was a very good stance in regards to, are they receiving it? But in the military, if a situation happened, we always had contingency plans where we'd go to the shelf and pick up a plan if something happened. In this case, we do not have a contingency plan, and it looks like we might, if you will, eventually implement one or initiate a contingency plan just for such a situation. We've all discussed in regards to different variables on what we should do. Maybe we should possibly put it into a possible contingency plan. But bottom line, student achievement now.
Thank you, John. Does anyone else have any comments? Thank you, Commissioner.
You're welcome.
Very much. Okay, we'll move into our standing committees. Our first standing committee is our AQuest Teaching and Learning domain. Maureen.
There were 2 action items and 1 discussion item in the Teaching and Learning Domain Committee today. The first action item is to accept award of an enhanced education grant from the U.S. Department of Education. Committee members received information from Valerie Foy, and we have asked her to share this information with the board. So Valerie, with that, if you would come and share that. And you can bring John with you.
Thank you very much. I'm Valerie Foy. I'm Director of Statewide Assessment.
John Moon, I'm the project manager for our NISA assessment.
And John's with me because he handles our contracts, and we're gonna talk about a contract, and it's very related to the grant. So, we began this process, in fall of 2016, and we have been working with a number of companies, and with Wyoming and Montana, 2 other states, in the development of an enhanced, assessment grant. And we submitted that in the fall, and we were notified in December that we had received that grant. We were one of 2 states to receive an enhanced assessment grant, and Maryland was the other state, so we were quite excited about that. But in addition, we were told that we had 90 days to complete some work and send it to the U.S. Department of Education in order to get the grant. We had to complete this. So we did complete that and submitted it. And so then we were in a position where we could bring this forth to discuss the acceptance of the grant. And I wanted to talk just a little bit about what this grant is for. So I did include in the rationale a summary. It is the overview it's the abstract for the project. And it is, and I included the priorities also in my rationale. But this is a grant that focuses on science. So it focuses on science because first of all, we in Nebraska, we're working to revise our science standards. And the science standards have great depth to them. They use the terminology nationwide, 3-dimensional. And so the science is a great place to focus this grant because this grant truly focuses around a broader topic. And that broader topic is how does balanced assessment, formative assessment, interim assessment relate to summative assessment, the statewide summative tests that are given at the end of the year. So I have explained in writing, for example, in English language arts, when your students are writing in class as part of their formative and interim, and it's a performance type assessment, we can assess writing on the state test. But in science, so much of the work they do in formative and interim assessment is hands-on. It's hands-on experiments, it's labs that they do. So how do we relate those to, because we are not actually going out and having every student in the state of Nebraska do a science lab for us and somehow assess that. That, of course, is not what we're about. So how do we relate those assessments? How do we bring what happens in the classroom, teaching and learning on a daily, weekly, throughout the year basis, and have it affect our summative assessments and inform them? So that's what the work of the grant is about. It has a great deal of research embedded in it. It has, as I stated, we're working with a number of companies. EdCounts is the main company. They're helping us oversee everything in this. And so there are many facets to this grant. There is the work to be done, and Sarah Cooper and I in Teaching and Learning, who's the science specialist, have been in conversations about being out and giving presentations and working with educators in our state to create deeply embedded, valuable assessments and teaching and learning experiences, and then how that relates to summative assessment. Part of the data and the research that will be done is what is the evidence that it is making a difference in these summative assessments, and that in fact those formative and interim assessments and the activities do inform information about the summative assessment. So it's about science. We use science as our topic here, but it's about teaching and learning and the relationship of balanced assessment to summative assessment. So that's the goal of it. And the grant was for 3.9 million, almost 310. And so we are here to explain that and ask for your acceptance.
Are there any questions from the board members, Valerie or John?
So Valerie, I take it this is just a wash between the grant money and aid counts, is that correct?
No, it isn't quite a wash. It is about a $500,000 difference,
Okay.
466,467. So that money, so you move to that, that's the contract that's coming up next, and
Yes.
that's with Ed Counts. And, yes, so that is, we have approximately a $500,000 that we're keeping in state. But I want to be clear, that $500,000 is not just to complete, all of the activities related around this. Ed Counts is handling all the contracts. So often when we have teachers that are coming in and writing assessment items or writing rubrics or developing formative assessments, we bring them together in workshops, and if it's summertime, we offer a stipend, and those
Okay.
stipends will be paid. So that, all those contracts are gonna flow through Ed Counts. So Ed Counts isn't taking all this money. They're the lead company on this. They're overseeing the technology, the data, the research, but they're helping manage it in a very big way, and some of it goes to them,
Yes,
but a
ma'am.
lot of it'll be spent out.
Okay, Valerie, thank you, didn't mean to get ahead of you.
No,
Thank you.
I'm good.
Other questions from board members? Well, with that being said, no one has any further questions. As a result of the information that Valerie's presented, the committee recommends accepting this award. Now, that was step one of the two action items. And the other one, Valerie has pretty well shared about Ed Counts. And do you want to add anything more to that? Our second item, which is to approve a contract with Ed Counts to provide services related to the Enhanced Assessment Grant awarded to the Nebraska Department of Education. So Valerie, do you have anything you want to add? Are there any?
So we have been in progress with Ed Counts to develop a work plan with deliverables, just like we would do on any contract. So it's very laid out. This process will go over a number of years, as has been agreed, 3 to 4, with the U.S. Department of Education. And so the work will be done underneath the umbrella of this grant for the overall in the management among the 3 states. Then we will have our own money that's left here out of the grant to manage the grant. We have all the financial responsibility of filing everything for the grant and being the overall managers within this state. And John I told John he has to answer all the hard, detailed questions about setting this contract up, because he does our contracts.
So who's going to give John some hard questions here?
You guys are all business people, you know how the contracts work.
Okay. Well, with this, the committee has also recommended approving this contract, and we'll be voting on that tomorrow. The discussion item we had in our committee was an overview of assessment standard setting with specific reference to ACT and NISA English Language Arts and spring ACT test date. And again, Valerie shared the information with the committee, and she's going to give us a brief update on this.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to take this in this order. First, I want to talk about the spring 2018 ACT testing date. So the way this process works is that ACT sets a series of dates that states can choose, they get to choose one, to administer the ACT. So we took the dates that had been proposed to us from ACT, and we sent a survey out to the school superintendents in this district superintendents in the state of Nebraska. And we asked them 2 questions. We gave them the 5 dates, and we asked them which ones would work for them. And the second question we asked is, do any of these dates conflict with your spring break? When is your spring break? Because we wanted to know that. And we didn't get a perfect answer from this, but the determination from this survey is that the spring testing date in 2018 will take place on April 3rd for the paper pencil date. So this year, more than 80% of our students are going to take the ACT paper pencil. It's a district choice of whether they do it online or paper pencil. And the date this year is April 19th, by the way. And so the date next year that was selected most widely of this series of dates is April 3rd for the paper pencil and April 24th for the makeup date. So those are the 2 paper pencil dates for general ed students. And the window in between there, between April 3rd and April 24th, on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of those dates, that test can be given online, and students who are accommodated, who have extended time, can also participate off those dates in addition to those dates. So in the vote that took place among the superintendents, there were a high number of districts that selected this date, but of the districts that selected it, they represented 16,500 of the juniors in the state of Nebraska out of about 22,000. So by far, this date represents the date wanted by superintendents, selected by superintendents, that represent the majority of students in Nebraska.
Any questions from board members? I just want you to know that we can expect more information on the standard setting in the future as we prepare to set the assessment standards. So there'll be more to come down the road.
Thank you, Maureen.
I do want to thank the committee and everyone that came to speak, and Valerie had a tough job to do. She had a lot of talking to do, but before I finish, I want to turn this over to the commissioner because he has an update for the board on the assessment request for proposal.
Yeah, and I think Valerie might have had one more thing on standard setting. I didn't know for sure if you want to just share that quickly about what our timeline was in discussion. I know she had a bit more. Yeah.
So we have essentially this spring, 2017, 2 tests being given in the state of Nebraska, statewide, that have not been given before. Our high school juniors are going to be taking the ACT. Our students in grades 3 through 8 are going to be taking the NISA ELA, English Language Arts. When we have a new test, the State Board of Education sets the standards. And what that means is it's a motion by the State Board of Education to set the standard, meaning how many items does a student need to get correct to be, and I'm going to use the names of our current categories, but these may very well be renamed. How many does a student need to get correct to be in below? How many do they need to get correct to be in meets? And how many do they need to get correct to be in exceeds? There's a great deal of background work that goes into this. The NISA ELA one is a typical standard setting process for us based on content. The ACT is very different. And for the ACT, we will need to set cut scores for science, for mathematics, and for English language arts. So 2 new tests being given, but that ACT, that's got 3 subtests in it. And so we're working with representation from our district, from Nebraska Department of Education, and we're reaching out to post-secondary because they should be part of this process also.
So I will jump in a little bit. Thanks, actually. And I wanted to make sure we got that out there because that's an important board conversation and policy that the board has ahead of them relative to setting those particular standards and scores or cut scores and making some decisions as we have a lot of transitions and changes happening around our assessment system. And that's really the last item. I wanted to make sure that I could update you on this. Obviously, we've been in the middle of a process to select a new potential vendor for grades 3 through 8 assessment. We had a great conversation in the committee. I appreciate that. This is not really a discussion item, but just an update. And in fact, as we're really in the middle of the RFP and the selection process, but we have decided that it's appropriate to delve in further and have specific conversations with 2 companies around our next steps on selecting our vendors for the general assessment for grades 3 through 8, as well as our alternate assessment. And so we will begin work with NWA to see if we can get a general assessment contract, possibly, and negotiated that and bring back for further discussion at a later time an alternate assessment with DRC. Our alternate assessment is really a written test for the 1% of students that can't otherwise take a general assessment. This is a substantial amount of work yet for us in a very short period of time. I appreciate Valerie and all of the team that have been working on this. But I just want to be able to highlight that. We'll get our work done and then have an opportunity for that conversation and decision with you as a full board, hopefully next month. So just wanted to be able to share that. So thanks, Maureen.
Well, Madam President, that
Yes.
concludes the teaching and learning domain.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to make just a little change in the agenda. I'm going to move 4.4 up so that these nice people can go home if they would like. April, would you please come forward? During the Strategic Planning, Performance, and Improvement Committee meeting today, we had the opportunity to meet and visit with some people from our learning community. And April's going to talk about the work that she's been doing with them. And so, April, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon, members of the board. Again, April Phillips, I'm the Student Achievement Coordinator. I work in accreditation and school improvement. And one of the reasons that I'm sitting up here today is because written into the language of 79-2122, which describes the newly created Community Achievement Plan, is language around the role of the Student Achievement Coordinator to work in consultation with the representation of the learning community throughout the development of the Community Achievement Plan. And so as you see, I've got a crowd of folks who have been among us this morning in committee and then also here this afternoon. And so I have to thank Lorraine Chang, who's the chair of the Learning Community Coordinating Council, who gave us a very in-depth presentation of the Community Achievement Plan. David Patton, who is the CEO of the Learning Community, who has helped to push this work forward since last year. Dr. Kevin Riley, the superintendent of Gretna Public Schools, who is also with us this morning. Dr. Mark Feldhausen, who has worked as a consultant with the learning community and with MOAC, who has really spearheaded the writing team process throughout this last year. Kim Bodensteiner from the Buffett Early Childhood Institute, who worked on the writing team, particular to some of the areas of focus around early childhood. Treva Haugard from the Goal Center, who is also a part of the writing team, who worked on, again, the Goal Center, the attendance-related initiatives that are included. And then Dr. Jim Sutphin is also here today in support of the plan. And so, like I said, today we had a really lovely presentation from Elaine Chang, the chair of the Coordinating Council for the Learning Community. And I am going to briefly summarize some of that presentation and discussion. Each of you should have at your desk area a brochure that looks like this. And so let me briefly walk you through it. This gives a synopsis of the learning community plan that you also have attached in your materials. You'll see an executive summary that outlines some of the data elements and the goal statements, as well as a summary of some of the kind of key principles that were considered throughout the development of this plan. The process for the plan really started following the passage of the legislation last April. We met for the very first time at the end of May last year at ESU 3, where we had representation from the 11 districts, from ESU 3, from the learning community subcouncils, and started a conversation about what might this community achievement plan in its initial iteration look like. That work continued through the fall of this past year as the 11 superintendents worked together to establish some of the key areas that are included in the plan. The plan went through revisions throughout the fall. It went before the local boards of education for the 11 school districts. In December, it went before the Learning Community Coordinating Council for consideration, for feedback and approval before it was submitted to NDE at the very end of the year. Here at NDE, you all, as state board members and committee, saw a draft of that plan. We provided feedback then. That plan has continued to go through revisions through the months of February and March. The plan, again, in the draft or in the version that you have in front of you today, went before the Learning Community Coordinating Council for their final review and approval in March. It was approved in March and then submitted here to NDE for your all's approval according to the statute today. As you look through the plan and examine it, keep in the back of your mind that also in the statute there's description of language about an annual update on the progress of this plan. And so you can imagine that the work that you see outlined throughout the plan, that again, before December, you would see updates to hear the progress. The plan following approval would be in place for 3 years and then be revisited again. And so truly it's been developed as a continuous improvement plan, so really looking at an iteration that would continue. Let me quickly touch base on a couple of items for you that are in the plan. If you look at the back of the brochure that you have in front of you, you'll see the centers for implementation. Those are the key components or sections that are included within the plan. So you see that there's the superintendent's early childhood education plan. You'll see that there are services and programs provided through the learning community. The Goals Center, which is, me mentioned earlier, really focused on family, school, community partnerships to support students in attending school. And then MOAC has been in the process for a couple of years of pulling together a collective impact plan, which is the final component of the plan. If you turn to the center section of the plan, you'll see some key investment areas that were identified as specific investments that could and should improve equity and increase access. And so throughout these centers for implementation, you'll see common themes of early childhood education, and you all mentioned already today the work that's going on, the reputation that Nebraska is building as being a site for other states to look at when it comes to early childhood, family engagement, post-secondary success, and fostering collaboration. And so I think overall of the conversation that happened this morning, the focus was on collaboration among the 11 school districts, collaboration across the learning community, public, private partnerships, higher ed partnerships, and continued commitment to equity. And so when you look at the front part of this brochure, you'll see that there's a comprehensive commitment across the learning community. And Dr. Riley reminded us this morning, it's been a long-term commitment and will continue to be a long-term commitment to children from birth all the way through into career and success in career. And so with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam President. And before I do, I just want to echo again my appreciation for the representation that is here today. I think it reflects the work that has gone on throughout the last 9 months, certainly.
Thank you. This morning, when we had this committee meeting, you could tell the passion and compassion that these people have for their communities and how they really are very sincere about moving forward with their children. And this certainly didn't start yesterday. They've been working on this a very long time, but now have a chance to really put some implementation in with some help from some others. And so I commend them for all of their hard work. Does any of the group want to say anything?
I would just like to say that we worked tirelessly and collaboratively to bring this plan forward. And in our minds, whether the plan is approved or not, this commitment to fostering and building stronger pathways for student success from birth to workforce is something that we are all very committed to. And I particularly appreciate all of the work and efforts that went in on the part of the superintendents themselves, working to really iron out some of the foundational principles and the vision, the breadth of the vision that they gave us as a framework for the plan, but also the work group, and April's help was instrumental in moving us forward. So I really wanted to acknowledge that there was a lot of work put into this with a real focus on improving achievement equity and removing or reducing the barriers to student achievement, which is really the bottom line test for this plan. So great deal of commitment around collaboration and continuous improvement using best practices to really elevate opportunities for our 125,000 students in our learning community, and particularly those who are in free and reduced lunch, which are about 50,000 of our students. So really want to see that achievement gap closing faster. We've made a lot of good progress, but a lot more to be done, and looking at the data has really mobilized a lot of effort to really make sure that we stick to this plan. So thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. You're welcome. Kevin, did you want to say something?
I would say this, that
Kevin, you need to come up to the mic.
Broadcast.
normally,
Too good of an opportunity.
normally people don't give me a mic.
Well, you can't have it very long, but you can.
Lorraine asked me to just mention a little bit of what I told the smaller group this morning. This started 10 and a half years ago. The superintendents were in the middle of the learning community battle, and all we wanted to do was work together to serve kids, to be real honest with you. You talk money and everybody splits up. You talk kids and everybody comes together. And so we met and we just talked about, what do we want to do? Instead of letting someone else chart our course, no matter what laws are passed, what do we want to do? We wanted to do three things. One, we wanted to work together on something like this. Number two, we wanted to make sure we increased funding for poverty and ELL, because those schools need it. I don't in Gretna, but other districts in the learning community do, and that's where the money should be going. Third, that no school district should be financially penalized for being in a learning community. That's really what we set out to do 10 and a half years ago. And as we move forward, we started looking at the gaps in communication that we felt were detrimental to the children we serve. For example, there's a big gap in communication between early childhood, daycare centers, and PK-12 education. There's a big gap between the 11 of us in terms of talking to each other about best practice in everything we do. There's a gap between us and 2- and 4-year colleges and institutions. There's a big gap between us and business and industry. Why aren't we talking together, working together to improve the quality of life for our kids in the metro area? There's 132,000 of them. And we graduate 15,000 a year, sending them off into school, 10 to 15,000. So shouldn't we be working together on a plan that improves the communication between all of those groups and institutions that can improve the quality of life for our kids? So you can see that's kind of how it started to develop. As we got into the learning community law changes, we said the same thing every year to the legislature. Last year was the first time they really listened and said, yeah, we got to make some changes. And Senator Sullivan was so good to work with in regards to this, and so many of the senators. What we came down to was a big concern Senator Sullivan had that, well, if we do this, the superintendents won't work together anymore. And we started to show her everything that we were doing. And this vision we had for our children in the metro area. And she said, good, show me. It's going to be part of the law. That's what the Community Achievement Plan is. That wasn't an idea that came from a legislative group. That came from us. And now put it in writing and do it. That's how I'm going to hold you together. We said, great. That's what we're going to do anyway, whether we're required to or not. Well, so this is something we've been working on for a long time. And it's a vision. And it's about the quality of life. And improving quality of life for every one of our 132,000 kids in the metro area. And when I say 132, I'm including Council Bluffs.
Thank you, Kevin. Do board members have any questions or comments? Patsy?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for not only your vision, but for your tenacity, sticking with something for 10 and a half years. And I know you're guided by the importance of it. And I truly believe that so many of our educational problems would be solved if, so many, not all, would be solved if we would address the issues of our children and poverty. And we can't ignore it any longer because it's growing. Mm-hmm. And I've watched it over the last 5 years. And so we have to step up and have the courage to do something about it. So thank you for having the courage, for creating a plan and following through with it. And I will be excited to hear more and more and more about you.
Rachel?
I'd like to thank all of you for being here, and more importantly for coming last month and letting us give you feedback, and then coming back with a plan that really reflected and I think aligned with what we believe is an important vision as well. So it's heartwarming to know that I think we're moving in the same direction, and I thought you did a fabulous job in pointing that out in the plan that you brought forward today. We talked this morning just a little bit, and it doesn't have to be now, but at some point, to give feedback for what are the elements, next steps. The work that you've done is something that I think is important for us to think about relative to Essa, and we talked about this morning. And we've talked about the stakeholder engagement processes and the need for more input. And I think with all the work that you've done, for you to give us some input on where we're moving forward with Essa, to see that we are aligning these stars together, because I do believe that's what will make a difference for children, not just in Douglas and Sarpy County, but across the state. And I think your leadership in this process is important across the state from a different perspective. And so things that we talked about this morning, and ideas and concepts and things that you've put into place. We've talked a lot about early childhood, but we've not spent as much time talking about attendance and what you've been doing with the Goal Center and the learning community and family engagement and the kinds of things you've been doing. So I think there's some very important lessons that we can learn and lessons that we can incorporate statewide in the direction that we're going from the work that you've done. So thank you very much.
John?
Kevin, I had brown hair when you started this. I do remember that.
I had some hair.
We have the best and the brightest of our school administrators here, and for years have been working together and building and implementing a community achievement plan, all agreed with 11 school districts that make up the learning community. They are the tip of the spear in closing the achievement gap and providing a first-class education for each of our students. If they say they need this plan, let's back their judgment and provide them the tools they need to get the job done, the plan. Many districts have relayed to me that their vision and mission statements on their strategic plans are closely linked to the community achievement plan. Let's see the vision move forward. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I think, oh,
Can I make one?
you bet.
Yeah, I'm going to thank everybody too. I get to sit back so often and observe everyone. Quite a process, and I appreciate, first of all, everyone that was involved. I know Dave and Mark coming a couple times here, and Kevin and Jim and everyone that I'm missing. I know April. Thank you for your leadership on these fronts. I think it's also important to point out, I think there was engagement with your local boards in this process as well, that this was deep engagement in a meaningful way. And again, I think an opportunity for the department to engage deeper with the learning community is part of my goal too, because when we start to share those goals, it's our opportunity to link together and provide that kind of arm-in-arm approach to solving challenging problems, but also just improving our system. So thank you.
And Commissioner, thank you for your assistance in your direction. I hope you see that we're holding ourselves to a higher level of accountability than anybody else. Because accountability, as you well know, isn't the federal required test score. Bigger than that. It's so much bigger than that.
Yes.
And so we've set out to kind of put our neck on the line here, that we're going to be accountable at a very high level.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, Patsy.
I just don't want us to forget just one thing. I feel an obligation to say this, and that is that some of the problems that you're solving in your urban schools are just as great in our rural schools. And so let's look to the future to that too, because those kids deserve our attention as well.
We had a group come and meet with us last week about our plan from, I won't say where, because they need to be here to tell you that, but they wanted to look at our plan, and they want to mirror our plan.
Good.
Wonderful.
I think John said it very nicely, that we certainly want to help you move forward as we vote tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Lisa?
I mentioned this morning. I just have to say it again. When I had the opportunity to sit in the hearing with Senator Kate Sullivan and see the superintendents in the learning community line up in front to testify, and you are not only concerned about your students, but what you did to protect the students learning in poverty was amazing. And I am so proud of each and every one of you who got up one at a time and shared your heart, not just for your school district, but for everyone in the Omaha area that's part of the learning community. That touched my heart, and I thank you.
Yes. We're going to take a short break. The state board is now in session again, and we will go on with our standing committees. John, will you report on behalf of Molly O'Halloran? Molly is dealing with some illness in her family, so she's not with us today. So John has the Success and Access Domain Committee report.
Thank you very much, Pat. I'm John Witzel. I'm the acting committee chair for Student Success and Access Domain. We have one action item today under Educational Opportunities and Access, and Frida Lang will be briefing that. Besides the one action item, we had 3 discussion items also. One of the discussion items was involving the IT initiative plus ESSA, briefed by Dean Folkers. 2 others were the standards for PE and the arts, briefed by Corey Epler. So if I could have Frida Lang come up and, if you will, review the action item with us.
I'm Frida Lang from Accreditation and School Improvement, and tomorrow we're going to ask you to approve that the non-public schools that are on the list that you received in your materials be approved to operate in the 2017-18 school year in accordance, in this case, with Rule 14. Rule 14 outlines all the requirements for our non-public schools. And by statute, all non-publics in the state have to be approved. Now, when you start looking at that list, you will probably see that there may be a number of schools that you're familiar with that aren't on the list. And in that case, it's probably because they're accredited. All non-publics have the option to follow Rule 10 rather than Rule 14 to become accredited after they have operated for a year. And in many cases, these schools have operated for many, many years. But if they've operated for a year successfully under Rule 14, then they can apply to become accredited, which means they are following a little higher standard. And that's not to say that many of the non-publics aren't following the same standard, but they have elected to remain under Rule 14 as approved. We have on the list basically 106 schools. That includes 10 high schools, the rest being elementary. The elementary may be kindergarten through 5th grade or as high as 8th grade. And you can see what that configuration is on the list. One of the schools that is on that list you'll probably see again in June. It's moving forward at this time to be accredited, and that is the Nelson Mandela School. And in committee, it was asked, what grade levels. You will look, and it's approved to operate from kindergarten through 8th grade. That's their the plan that they have. At this point in time, it is operating kindergarten through 2nd grade, and next year they are adding 3rd grade, and then progressively through up to 8th grade. And we have been visiting them on an annual basis, and it's a very interesting school. Then, as I said, there's 106. Now, 5 years ago, there were 145 on that list. A few of them, a very small few, have closed, but there have been from 145 to this 106 have moved. Many of them have moved towards accreditation. So I think you can see the standard that they are interested in demonstrating that they are meeting. We visit the schools. Well, first of all, at the beginning of every school year, they send in an assurance statement noting how they are adhering to Rule 14. And in addition to that, we do a random selection of the schools throughout a school year to just do kind of a spot check. That spot check is not just a checklist, however. It is to visit with them to see, what it is that may be of concern to them, or where they are struggling to meet accreditation regulations or approval regulations and such. So it's a lot of times just getting to know them and to become more familiar with the settings in which they're operating. And by the way, Hadar is about 7 miles north of Norfolk, so you. So maybe you can cross one off of your list there.
Thank you.
And geography too.
But if there's any questions,
Does anyone? Rachel?
I do have a list of questions, but a couple of things that I want to try to wrap my head around in this process. And as we think about Rule 14 and Rule 10, as we think about schools that are approved versus accredited, do we require or guide communication out to parents differentiating between approved schools and accredited schools? Is that anything we have been involved with, engaged with? I think about there are sometimes, in particularly for the high schools, if a student is receiving a diploma from a non-accredited school, there can have implications for that in some of their post-high school choices. So do we communicate out? Have we looked at what the implications are to make sure people understand the value of being accredited versus approved?
okay, accredited and approved, the graduation requirements are by statute the same. But as far as reaching out, where the issues arise are with our exempt schools when it comes to questioning the validity of a diploma.
Okay, so there's no issues with NCAA standards for students who are athletes, for students looking at various scholarships for various post-secondary institutions. There are not any issues for students graduating from an approved but non-accredited institution?
And I can't answer that
Okay.
Specifically
I think
when
we
it
should-
comes to NCAA, you're saying, or
Right,
NSAA?
NCAA has standards for scholarship
And they're-
recipients in a host of activities and areas. And most of the post-secondary opportunities are tied back to students have to have come from an accredited high school. And so I guess I hadn't thought about and we don't have many schools that are high school that are approved. I guess my question is, do we have that information? Do we share that information? And in particular, do parents know if there's any ramifications for a student attending an approved school versus an accredited school? I think we should research that a little bit and make sure we have the information on that.
I would say we don't address that formally, and so, yes, I understand where you're coming.
Right, like if I was a parent calling and asking that question, I think we ought to be able to answer it. And so, yeah, that would be, I think, important for us to know. And then the other question is, do we know, because we spent a lot of time last year on the textbook loan program, do we know how many of these approved schools that are non-public approved participate in the textbook loan program? I know, again, that's another link, but I'm just curious if we know that information.
With accreditation, we don't have that information.
Or
I think
with
it's here,
approval, we don't have
in
any.
the department, but.
Okay.
We
You
could.
do have that information, you could
Well,
cross.
let me put it this way. We know the public schools that participate in that.
Do you know the non-public schools?
Well,
That's my question.
remember that the textbook loan goes to individuals.
But
Right, so we have to.
typically, you know which
region-
non-public the
right,
individual
exactly. That's what I
attended. Do you
mean.
see
Yeah,
what I'm
we'd have to
saying?
make that logical leap between
Yeah.
the public school close to these approved schools that might be that their resident students' parents might be participating in that. and it tends to be, I think, and again, this is anecdotal, but it tends to be that Catholic schools participate at a higher rate in that compared to other schools.
Than some of the other
Yeah, absolutely.
schools. So again, I just didn't know if we share that information to non-public schools that their parents have the right to participate in the textbook loan program.
I'll throw one more thing in there because it's been a conversation between Frida and Diane and me relative to also from a federal standpoint that there's certain other services and professional development. And so we are required to have an ombudsman position, and Diane Steamer is in that position. We had some discussion of, well, should that be underneath accreditation or should that be underneath federal programs? And so we had a bit of that dialogue and ended up settling on that. But there is that linkage between how we accredit and approve schools relative to the services that they have available. And so that's been a conversation, especially looking at those federal side dollars that are supposed to provide professional development and other things as well. So it's a similar issue, but what services do we have that actually go to these places? We actually have quite a few, and I think you raise a good point of maybe an inventory of how they're taking advantage of them.
And then my last question. When was the last time we've looked at Rule 14 for any substantive changes?
2012.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
I failed to ask that question that Rachel brought up about the difference between accredited and the approved, and I really am concerned and would like to see you give us some kind of response as to what impact that approved might have if, on a individual looking for a higher education. So I guess I join Rachel in that, and I apologize that I didn't ask that question earlier.
Well, maybe you can bring that information back to us in May.
Microphone.
Sorry. Maybe you can do some research on that and bring some information back to us in May, just as a little report. Is that okay? Okay.
The committee, if you will, approved this. We had one committee member missing, so it was 3-0 in favor of approval. And thank you, Frida. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Pat, that completes
All
student
right.
success. Next.
We will move on to Rachel. Please report on the legislative committee meeting.
All right, thank you. And I think Brian will be coming up to do some of the report. I'll just highlight a couple of things. The legislative committee did meet via conference call earlier this month as well. And as a part of that process, we will be making a recommendation to support an amendment 625 to LB 14 around civic readiness. So we'll talk a little bit more about that piece. But our discussion that really was around civic readiness and around LB 14 led to a recommendation that the committee also has that Deputy Commissioner Halstead will be pursuing, and that we would like to recommend to look at language that was put together for that Amendment 625 to be incorporated into AQuest, and with it coming back to whatever appropriate committee. We had a lot of discussion of where it should go, so whether it be teaching and learning or which committee, but there are some things that we'd like to see incorporated in AQuest from those recommendations. That discussion was really around becoming proactive rather than reactive. So we know that some bills may not get through the legislature this year, and this is an example of some language that was put together for amendment that I think we believe is beneficial, and we don't have to necessarily wait for a statute, that we can look at how to incorporate it in AQuest now as opposed to waiting. And so we felt that language was important to consider, and I think you've got that in your files as well. So the other things that Brian will be talking about, we discussed just the update. He'll be covering the update of legislative bills and the session and kind of some timeline pieces around that process. And then we have asked Brian to talk just a little bit about school finance. School finance not being something that we're actively engaged in, but certainly something we should be very cognizant of, and understanding how our advocacy or lack of advocacy might be perceived as a part of the process. As well as I think it's important that we recognize as a board the amount of work that staff has spent this year with the legislature. And so Brian, Bryce, a host of staff have been very engaged in providing technical support and information to the legislature, and I think that it's critical that we understand that time commitment, and first of all thank the staff for how much time they have spent this year with the legislature. So with that, Brian, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, good afternoon. Brian Halstead, Deputy Commissioner, Chief of Staff. As you can see, attached to your agenda is the summary report of all of the bills. We've organized it by bills you took positions on first, those that are priority bills. So some background information. Today was the 61st legislative day, and next Monday will be their 62nd legislative day of a 90-day session. So winter is over with, the thaw has come, and everything right now is fluid in the legislature. It has been a very busy time between when they first started on January 5th and to date. Staff here at the department have been interacting on a very frequent basis with lots of senators staff on bills, issues, data requests, all of that. That is not really surprising, because if you remember, before this session started, 35 of the members in that legislature were going to have 2 or less years of experience, so there was a big turnover. We all knew that was coming. There's been a lot of help by department staff to committee staff to senator staff as to helping them understand some of the laws that are there, some of the nuances and everything else. School finance has been a big topic, and we all knew it was going to be because of the budget issues that were coming. Bryce and his team have, since up to yesterday, had done 75 models dealing with some form of school finance legislation in that regard. So there's been a great deal of department staff working on that, also responding to questions, having conversations to understand the nuances of all of that. And occasionally we get calls from school district officials about, well, somebody said you were supporting this bill or this amendment. And as everyone should know and has clearly established, the state board establishes positions of the Department of Education and school finance staff. And there's not a single school finance bill where this board has been in a supporting role. We are always neutral and have been. We provide the technical assistance. I am glad to see that Bryce is sitting here in this room and not on the phone with talking to staff, walking through particular dynamics of models or anything else. But it's taken a great deal of time. But then again, we've always at the department had a policy of we will respond to senators who make requests. There is no, I got to check with people and all of that. We are more open and responsive to requests for data, for feedback. It has occurred across the floor. It's not just school finance, although that has been the biggest issue this session and the number of models run. And as you can see, the April work session document, there is a bill listed in there, LB 409. Well, put that together at noon yesterday, and late yesterday afternoon the Education Committee advanced it from committee. It's going to be coming up for debate. It is most likely the bill that will be utilized to make changes to the TIOSA formula to match whatever the appropriation number is for state aid to schools. And everybody knows that's the single largest line in the entire state budget, so that's always a big issue that's there. But I don't know that people quite understand all the time how much staff time is put into responding to senator requests or to other people asking questions about what's been produced, but it is part of the work we've done. We always do it. It's just a little bit more this session. The key thing for you to recognize is that since there are only 28 legislative days left, almost everything you're going to see on the agenda at the legislature is a priority bill. If a bill hasn't been prioritized, it's most likely not going to receive any attention. As you can see, LB 512, which you supported, which was a cleanup bill that we always put together at the department. On general file, they added lots of bills to the cleanup bill, which is not unusual. The non-controversial other bills are added to it, so we'll see when that comes up on select file if there's more added to it in that regard. There are some bills that you oppose that are still in committee, which may be where they stay for the rest of this session. Obviously, the budget is the biggest issue that's out there. So I'll certainly answer any questions you have on any of the bills in the listing. Clearly, as Rachel said, the State Board Legislative Committee recommends your support of AM 625 to LB 14, and it was written by staff to be a broader focus on civic engagement and everything else as part of the Social Studies Summit that happened in February. I know a couple of board members were at that, so.
Thank you, Brian, and I want to just add not only to recognize how much work the staff has done when you think about 75 models, but to also recognize our school districts and their business and finance personnel who are spending a lot of time trying to anticipate what does this mean for us. So I don't think we spend enough time thinking about and talking about the manpower or woman power that it may take to look at the models, develop the models, provide feedback, not just from the department, but school districts across the state investing that very, very valuable personnel time in this process. So thank you for the update. Thanks to the committee, Maureen and Pat, and again, Molly's on our committee who was not able to be here today. But unless there's anything else to add, we will just bring one item to you for tomorrow. Thank you very much.
I think we should give Bryce a couple of days off.
We do.
See?
We give him some Sundays off.
Oh. Well, there you go. Why am I even, talking about this? All right, we have one more standing committee. John, Budget and Finance, please.
Thank you very much. Budget and Finance Committee, we have 2 action items slated for approval tomorrow. If I could have Bryce and Shane and Joel. Yeah, Joel first.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
All right, I'm here to brief you on the proposed changes to the personnel rules. About 80% of our employees are covered by the personnel rules, and the rest are covered by the bargaining agreement, which you previously approved at the January meeting. So the revisions are summarized in your meeting material, so I won't go through all of those, and you've seen them before, so there's really nothing new there. As you can see from the hearing report, nobody came to testify at the hearing, and no written testimony was received. So I did call attention to one technical correction in the hearing where we had the bargaining agreement refers to non-exempt employees in one section by referencing a section number. So we missed transferring that information to the rules, and so it read exempt when it should read non-exempt. So we will correct that. Otherwise, we recommend board approval of the proposed revisions to the NDE personnel rules.
Any questions? I must say 4 of the board members did vote for approval on this at the committee meeting. If there's no questions, thank you, Joel.
All right, thank you.
Next action item, Bryce and Shane, thank you.
The other action item the Budget and Finance Committee discussed was the updates to Rule 1. These updates were to clarify requirements that were related to average daily membership and average daily attendance testing performed by the independent public school auditors. The clarification includes specific steps that we need them to perform, as well as the reporting requirements as far as their reports to us, what they have to address. Basically, this clarification, this information was already in the rule. We're just clarifying it based on a audit finding from the 2015 attestation audit to address that concern, and to make it a little more clear. So that's what we're asking for your approval tomorrow on Rule 1.
Any questions? Also, 4 board members on the committee voted to approve this action item. So thank you, gentlemen.
Pat?
And on that note, if you have nothing else for the good of the order, we are adjourned. The regularly scheduled meeting of the State Board of Education will reconvene at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning in this room.